After my wife's funeral, my son found a cream-colored paper hidden inside my old desk. He looked at it for 2 seconds, crumbled it up, and threw it in the trash can, laughing that it was worthless garbage that should have stayed buried forever. I did not say a word. I just waited for them to leave, picked it out of the coffee grounds and eggshells, and walked straight to the bank. When the manager saw what was on that paper, his face went pale. He locked the doors and whispered, "All the police immediately. Nobody leaves this building." My son thought he was throwing away trash. He did not know he was throwing away his freedom. Before I tell you what was on that paper, let me introduce myself. My name is Wallace King, and I am 70 years old. To the neighbors in our quiet suburb of Seattle, I am just a retired bookkeeper who drives a 15-year-old Ford and wears sweaters with holes in the elbows. To my only son, Brandon, and his wife, Vanessa, I am something much worse. I am a burden, an obstacle, a walking expiration date that is taking too long to arrive. They see my silence as senility. They see my frugality as poverty. They have no idea that for 35 years I was a forensic accountant who hunted down corporate fraud for the federal government. I spent my life finding the secrets that powerful men tried to hide in the numbers. I learned to be invisible. I learned to watch. And for the last 5 years, I have been watching my own son become a stranger. The day we buried my beloved Beatrice was gray and cold, the kind of rain that soaks into your bones and never leaves. I stood by the grave watching the mahogany casket lower into the ground. My heart felt like it had stopped beating along with hers. Beatrice was my anchor. She was the only one who knew the truth about our life, and she had made me promise to keep living simply so Brandon would learn the value of hard work. We failed him. Or perhaps he just failed us. I looked at Brandon standing across the grave. He was checking his watch. He was 40 years old, dressed in a designer suit that I knew was bought on credit. He looked impatient, not sad. Beside him, Vanessa was typing furiously on her phone, probably complaining to her friends that the service was taking too long. She did not shed a single tear. When the ceremony ended, I expected them to take me back to my small apartment, or maybe to a diner for a quiet meal. I was exhausted. My grief was a physical weight pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. "Get in the car," Dad Brandon said. His voice was not gentle. It was the tone a manager uses with an underperforming employee. "We are going to the house." I thought he meant he was taking me home. I was wrong. He drove past the turn from my apartment and headed straight for the old family house where Beatrice and I had lived for 40 years before downsizing. We had kept the house empty for the last year, unsure if we should sell it or keep it for the grandchildren we never had. "Why are we going here?" I asked. My voice sounded raspy and weak. "We need to do inventory," Vanessa said from the front seat without turning around. Her voice was sharp, like breaking glass. "Now that Beatrice is gone, we need to see what is worth selling. The market is hot, Wallace. We cannot let this place sit here rotting." Inventory. They called it inventory. We had just put her body in the ground less than an hour ago, and they were already calculating the liquidation value of her life. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell them to stop the car, but I stayed silent. I had to see how far they would go. I had to know the depth of their greed. When we entered the house, the air was stale and cold. It smelled of lavender and old paper, the scent of my wife. It comforted me and broke me at the same time. Vanessa wrinkled her nose in disgust. "God, it smells like old people in here," she said. She pulled a pair of blue latex gloves from her purse and snapped them on. It was a sound I will never forget. Snap. Like she was preparing to handle toxic waste. She walked straight to the hall closet where Beatrice kept her coats. She pulled out the wool coat Beatrice had worn on our 40th anniversary. It was still in perfect condition. Vanessa held it with 2 fingers as if it were infected. "Trash," she declared. "Nobody buys this vintage junk anymore. It smells like mothballs." She took a black contractor bag from her pocket, shook it open, and stuffed the coat inside. Then she grabbed the handmade quilts Beatrice had sewn. Trash. The collection of ceramic angels Beatrice loved. Trash. I stood in the doorway, leaning on my cane, watching my life being shoved into plastic bags. "Vanessa, please," I said softly. "That coat." She loved that coat. Vanessa did not even look at me. "Wallace, please do not make this harder than it is. We are doing you a favor. You cannot keep this junk. You are going to a facility soon, and they do not allow clutter." A facility. So that was the plan. They had not even discussed it with me. Brandon was not in the hallway. He had gone straight to my study. I heard the sound of wood splintering. I walked as fast as my old legs would carry me down the hall. I found Brandon in my office. He had used a screwdriver to pry open the locked drawer of my mahogany desk. The wood was scratched and ruined. He was rifling through papers, tossing them onto the floor. Bills. Old tax returns. "Junk, junk, junk," he muttered. "What are you looking for, Brandon?" I asked. "Insurance policies." "Dad," he said without looking up. "Stocks, bonds, cash. Mom must have hidden money somewhere. You guys lived like paupers, there has to be a stash." "There is no stash, Brandon," I said. "We lived on my pension." He laughed, a cruel, dry sound. "Yeah, I know. That is why I need to find something valuable. This house is a teardown. The land is worth something, but the structure is garbage." He grabbed the old family Bible from the back of the drawer. It was a heavy leather-bound book passed down from my grandfather. I held my breath. He shook the Bible upside down. He was not looking for scripture. He was looking for money. A single piece of paper fluttered out and landed on the dusty floor. It was a thick, cream-colored document folded into quarters. It had a heavy texture, almost like fabric. The edges were slightly yellowed with age. Brandon bent down and picked it up. He unfolded it. I watched his eyes scan the text. I knew exactly what that paper was. I had placed it there 35 years ago. I had checked on it every week. It was the only thing that mattered in that desk. Brandon squinted at the handwriting. "What is this?" he asked. He read the text out loud, his voice dripping with mockery. "King Logistics. Bearer Certificate. 1985. He looked at me and rolled his eyes. "Railroad stocks." "Dad. Seriously? You held on to railroad stocks from the 80s. "It is not a railroad stock," I said quietly. "It looks like a prop from a bad movie," Brandon said. He waved the paper in the air. "Look at this, Vanessa. Come see what the old man was hiding." Vanessa walked in holding a bag full of Beatrice's shoes. She looked at the paper. "Is it worth anything?" she asked. Her eyes lit up for a second. Brandon laughed again. "It is worthless. King Logistics. I looked it up on my phone just now. There is no such company listed on the New York Stock Exchange. It is a ghost company Dad probably set up to avoid taxes and then forgot about. It is garbage, just like everything else in this house." He did not know he was a real estate agent who thought he knew everything about money because he leased luxury condos he could not afford. He did not know about private holding companies. He did not know about Swiss trusts. He did not know that King Logistics was not a railroad company, but a shell entity I created during my biggest investigation to protect our assets from the cartels I was testifying against. He looked at the paper one last time. "Worthless," he repeated. He walked out of the office and into the kitchen. I followed him. He stood over the kitchen trash can, which was already full of the eggshells from the breakfast they had eaten before the funeral and the coffee grounds Vanessa had dumped out. "This should stay buried forever," he said. He crumbled the heavy cream paper into a ball. He did not just drop it. He threw it down with force as if he were angry at the paper for not being a stack of $100 bills. It landed right on top of the wet coffee grounds. There, he said, dusting his hands off. One less piece of clutter. Then he turned to me and delivered the final blow. Dad, tomorrow morning a cleaning crew is coming. They are going to empty the house. Everything goes. We have a buyer who wants the lot cleared by Friday. He is paying cash. We are using the money to invest in a new crypto venture Vanessa found. It is going to make us millions. You are selling the house, I asked. It is already done, Dad, Brandon said. I used the power of attorney you signed when you had your appendix out 5 years ago. You are not competent to handle this sale. You are too emotional. He walked past me, patting my shoulder roughly. Do not worry. We will use a little bit of the money to get you a room at Green Horizon. It is a nice nursing home. They have shared rooms, but the pudding is supposed to be good. He checked his watch again. Come on, Vanessa. We have a dinner reservation at Nobu. We can drop Dad at his apartment on the way. They left the room to get their coats. I stood alone in the kitchen. My hands were shaking, not from age, but from a cold, white-hot rage that I had not felt in decades. They had thrown away my wife's clothes. They had pried open my desk. They were selling my home to buy cryptocurrency. And they were putting me in a shared room at a state facility. But they had made one mistake. One fatal, arrogant mistake. I walked to the trash can. I reached in past the eggshells and the wet coffee grounds. I picked up the paper ball. I carefully uncrumpled it. I wiped the coffee stains off with my sleeve. The ink was still legible. The watermark was still visible if you held it up to the light. I folded it back up and put it in the inside pocket of my cheap cardigan. I walked out to the living room where they were waiting. Ready to go, Dad? Brandon asked, jingling his car keys. I looked at him. I looked at the son I had bounced on my knee, the son I had paid tuition for, the son I had protected from the darkness of my work. I saw nothing of myself in him. I saw a stranger. I am ready, I said. They dropped me off at my apartment building without even walking me to the door. Call you next week, Dad, Brandon yelled out the window as they sped away. I did not go inside. I waited until their taillights disappeared around the corner. Then I walked 3 blocks to the main branch of Chase Bank. It was 4:55 p.m. They were about to close. I pushed through the doors. My clothes were damp from the rain. I smelled like old dust and coffee grounds. The security guard stepped forward, his hand moving toward his belt. Sir, we are closing, he said. I ignored him. I walked straight to the desk of Mr. Abernathy, the branch manager. He was packing up his bag. Mr. Abernathy, I said. He looked up annoyed. Mr. King, we are closed. If you want to check your pension balance, you can use the ATM outside. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out the cream-colored paper. I placed it on his polished glass desk. I am not here for my pension, I said. I am here to deposit this. Abernathy sighed and picked up the damp coffee-stained paper. He looked like he was about to throw it back at me. Then his eyes adjusted. He saw the watermark. He saw the serial number. He saw the bearer clause. He stopped breathing. He dropped his briefcase. He looked at me and his face went completely pale. He reached under his desk and hit a silent button. Lock the doors, he shouted to the guard. His voice cracked. Lock them now. Mr. Abernathy, I asked calmly, is there a problem? He looked at the paper again, then at me. Mr. King, this certificate. This is a U.S. Treasury Bearer Bond Series 1985. We thought these were all destroyed. This serial number is flagged in the federal database. He swallowed hard. Your son Brandon King reported this specific bond destroyed in a house fire 10 years ago. He collected a $200,000 insurance payout on it. I smiled. A cold, sad smile. I know, I said. Abernathy picked up his phone. His hands were shaking. If this paper exists, then your son committed federal insurance fraud, Mr. King. If I process this, the system automatically notifies the FBI. Call them, I said. Mr. King, if I call them, your son is going to prison. Do you understand? I looked at the cream-colored paper. I thought about Beatrice's coat in the black bag. I thought about the shared room at Green Horizon. Call them, I repeated. And Mr. Abernathy? Yes, sir. Get me a cup of coffee while we wait. Black. No sugar. I sat down in the leather chair. I was not a tired old man anymore. I was the forensic accountant again, and the audit had just begun. I stood in the silence of the kitchen, listening to the heavy footsteps of my son and his wife moving through the rest of the house. They were like vultures picking at a carcass before the heart had even stopped beating. I did not say a word when Brandon insulted me. I did not scream when Vanessa threw away my wife's coat. I just stood there, leaning on my cane, pretending to be the fragile, confused old man they wanted me to be. It was a role I had played for 5 years, ever since I retired, but today it felt heavier than ever. They thought my silence was weakness. They did not know that silence was my trade. For 35 years, I was not just an accountant. I was a ghost. In the industry, they called me the auditor of ruins. When the federal government needed to trace assets hidden by cartels or corrupt senators, they called me. I spent decades sitting in rooms with dangerous men, listening to their lies and finding the truth in the numbers they tried to hide. I learned that the loudest man in the room is usually the most desperate, and the quietest man is the one watching him hang himself. I looked at the trash can where Brandon had thrown the paper. My mind drifted back to the night I made that promise to Beatrice. We were sitting on the porch of our first house. I had just closed the biggest case of my career, a RICO case that took down a syndicate moving millions through shell companies. I had access to a bonus that could have bought us a mansion. But Beatrice took my hand and said, if we give Brandon everything, he will never be anything. She was afraid of the money. She was afraid of the danger that came with it. So I made a choice. I buried the wolf. I became the quiet bookkeeper in the suburbs. I let Brandon believe we were scraping by on a pension, so he would learn to build his own life. I walked over to the trash can. My hand did not tremble. I reached past the wet coffee filters and the eggshells and pulled out the ball of paper. I laid it on the counter and carefully smoothed it out with the palm of my hand. To Brandon, it was just old stationery. To me, it was a key. This was not a stock certificate. It was a bearer instrument. In the world of high finance, a bearer bond is a dangerous thing. It does not have a name on it. It does not require a password. Whoever physically holds the paper owns the assets it represents. I had created the King Logistics Trust 35 years ago in Zurich. It was my fail-safe, my emergency exit. It was designed to hold the assets I had legally acquired through my private consulting work after I left the government. I had named it King Logistics because life is about moving things from where they are to where they need to be. I looked at the watermark under the kitchen light. It was still crisp. The value of the assets tied to this paper had grown quietly for 3 decades, compounding in the dark. It was not just money. It was leverage. It was enough to buy this entire neighborhood. It was enough to destroy the mountain of debt Brandon had secretly accumulated. I was about to fold it and put it in my pocket when the kitchen door swung open. I froze. Brandon was back. He had walked out to the car, but he had returned. He stood in the doorway, his face flushed with impatience and irritation. "I forgot the spare keys to the garage," he snapped. He stepped into the room and stopped. He saw me standing by the counter. He saw my hand resting on the crinkled, cream-colored paper I had just rescued from the garbage. A look of pure disgust crossed his face. It was not just annoyance, it was contempt. He looked at me like I was a child playing with mud. "Are you serious, Dad?" he asked. He walked over and snatched the paper from under my hand. He held it up, shaking it in my face. "We literally just threw this away." "Why are you digging in the trash?" "This is garbage, Dad. It is worthless." I looked him in the eye. For a second, I almost told him. I almost said, "Brandon, this paper is worth $50 million. I almost said, "Son, I can fix your debts. I can save you." But then he laughed. It was a cruel, sharp sound. "You are losing it, aren't you?" he said. "You are actually losing your mind. You think this is going to save you. You think you can take this to the store and buy bread with it." He threw the paper back onto the counter. It slid across the surface and stopped near the sink. "You know, Vanessa was right," he said, his voice dropping to a cold whisper. "We cannot keep you in this apartment anymore. It is dangerous. You are digging in trash cans. You are hoarding garbage." He took a step closer to me. He was tall, broad-shouldered, a man in his prime, using his size to intimidate his 70-year-old father. "I made a call this morning, Dad. I got you a spot at Green Horizon." Green Horizon. I knew the place. It was a state-funded facility on the edge of town. It was a warehouse for the forgotten. A place where they sedated the residents at 6 p.m. so they would not have to hire a night shift. "You are putting me in a home?" I asked. My voice was steady. "I am putting you where you belong," Brandon said. "It is affordable. Because guess what, Dad? You are broke. You have nothing. The sale of this house is barely going to cover our debts and your care. You are a liability. You are a black hole sucking up my future." He grabbed the spare keys from the hook on the wall. "Pack a bag tonight," he said. "Tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. the van is coming to pick you up. Do not make a scene. Do not embarrass me. And for God's sake, stop playing with the trash." He turned his back on me and walked out. I heard the front door slam. I heard the engine of his leased BMW revving in the driveway as he sped away with his wife. I stood there in the silence of the empty house. The smell of coffee grounds was still in the air. He had called me a liability. He had threatened me with a warehouse. He had looked at the lifeline I built for him and called it garbage. I looked at the paper on the counter. I picked it up. I folded it carefully into a small square. I placed it inside my wallet next to the picture of Beatrice. He was right about one thing. I was a liability. But not to him. I was about to become a liability to his freedom. I was not the father he thought I was. I was the auditor. And I had just found a discrepancy that could not be reconciled. I walked to the back door. I did not pack a bag for Green Horizon. I put on my coat. I checked my watch. The bank would close in 45 minutes. I walked out the door, and I did not look back at the house. The house was dead. My son was dead to me. The only thing alive was the paper in my pocket and the cold fury in my heart. I started walking toward the city. It was time to balance the books. The sound of a diesel engine idling outside my window was what woke me up. I had fallen asleep on the living room sofa, still wearing my clothes from the funeral, my hand clutching my wallet against my chest, as if it were a life preserver in a stormy sea. It was not a gentle awakening. The house vibrated. The windows rattled in their frames. It sounded like a tank had parked on the front lawn. I pulled myself up, my joints stiff and aching from the cold night air. I looked at the clock on the mantel. It was barely 7 in the morning. I had planned to leave early to get to the bank as soon as the doors opened, but I had overslept. My body was betraying me just as much as my family was. I walked to the window and pulled back the curtain. A massive white box truck was backed into my driveway, its tires crushing Beatrice's hydrangea bushes. 2 men in greasy coveralls were already lowering the ramp. They did not look like professional movers. They looked like repo men. They looked like people who were paid to clear a space quickly, not carefully. And standing on the porch, directing them like a traffic cop, was Vanessa. She was holding a large coffee cup in one hand and her phone in the other, barking orders. Move it, she yelled. We are on the clock. Everything goes. If it is broken, toss it in the dumpster. If it looks expensive, put it in the front of the truck. I opened the front door. The morning air was cold. Vanessa, I said, what is happening? We did not discuss this. She turned to look at me. She did not even blink. She did not say good morning. She did not ask how I slept. We are expediting the process, Wallace, she said, taking a sip of her coffee. The buyer called last night. He wants to do a walkthrough at noon. The house needs to be empty. Empty, I repeated. My voice felt small in the cold air. But I live here. My things are here. Beatrice's things are here. Not anymore, she said. She signaled to the men. One of them, a giant with a shaved head, pushed past me into the hallway. He went straight for the grandfather clock that had stood by the stairs for 50 years. He did not check for the pendulum. He just tilted it back and hefted it onto a dolly. I heard the internal chimes clang violently, a discordant sound of metal striking metal. Stop, I shouted. I reached out to grab the man's arm. That clock belonged to my father. You cannot just take it. The man stopped and looked at Vanessa. Load it, Vanessa said. Then she turned to me with a look of pity that was far worse than hatred. Wallace, you do not need a grandfather clock where you are going. The rooms at Green Horizon are small. A bed, a nightstand, and a chair. That is it. You have to let go of these material things. I stood there trembling. It was not just the clock. It was the violation. They were stripping the meat from the bones of my life while I was still using them. Then I remembered. My study. I turned and ran as fast as I could down the hallway. I needed to get to the study before they did. Not for the desk that Brandon had already ruined, but for the safe in the closet. I burst into the room and stopped dead. The closet door was open. The floor safe, which I had kept hidden under a rug, was exposed, and it was empty. I felt the blood drain from my face. My watch collection. It was not a collection of gold and diamonds. It was a collection of history. There was the Hamilton Railway watch my grandfather used, the Omega I bought when I passed my CPA exam, the simple Timex Beatrice gave me on our first Christmas when we had no money. There were 12 watches in total. They were not just timepieces. They were the milestones of my existence. I turned around. Brandon was standing in the doorway. He was wearing a tracksuit and holding a tablet. He looked tired, but energized by the adrenaline of the theft. Where are they, Brandon? I asked. My voice was low and dangerous. Where are the watches? He didn't even pretend not to know what I was talking about. He walked over to the desk and started tapping on his tablet. They are gone, Dad, he said. Gone where? Sold, he said. I listed them on an auction site last night. A collector in Dubai bought the whole lot. Wire transfer cleared this morning. You sold my watches, I whispered. You stole them and you sold them. I liquidated assets, Dad, he corrected me. And you should be thanking me. Do you know how much a vintage Patek Philippe goes for? I got top dollar. We needed the cash fast. Why, I asked. Why did you need $50,000 overnight? Vanessa walked into the room. She was smiling. A predatory, satisfied smile. Show him Brandon, she said. Brandon turned the tablet around. On the screen was a picture of a car. A bright yellow Porsche 911. It is a specialized lease, Brandon said, his eyes gleaming. I needed a substantial down payment to lock in the rate. This car, Dad, this is going to change my image. In real estate, image is everything. When clients see me pulling up in this, they will know I am a closer. They will trust me with their millions. I looked at the picture of the yellow car. Then I looked at my son. You sold your grandfather's watch to put a down payment on a car, I said. He shrugged. It was just sitting in a dark safe, Dad. It wasn't doing anyone any good. Now it is an investment in my career. I felt a wave of nausea. It was not just the greed. It was the stupidity. He was trading history for a lease. He was trading legacy for a shiny toy that would depreciate the moment he drove it off the lot. "I am calling the police," I said. I started to reach for the phone on the desk. "This is theft. I did not give you permission." Brandon moved faster than I expected. He grabbed my wrist. His grip was hard, painful. "You are not calling anyone," he said. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a folded document. He slapped it onto the desk. "Read it," he said. I looked at the paper. It was a medical power of attorney. I recognized my signature at the bottom. It was dated 5 years ago. "I remember this," I said. "I signed this when I had my appendix removed. It was temporary. It was in case I didn't wake up from the anesthesia." "Read the fine print," Dad Brandon said. "It says that if at any point I am deemed incapacitated or unable to make sound decisions, I have full authority over your medical and financial estate." "I am not incapacitated," I shouted. "I am recovering from a surgery from 5 years ago. I am perfectly fine." "Are you?" Vanessa asked, stepping closer. She looked at me with mock concern. "Wallace, look at you. You are wearing dirty clothes. You are shouting about old clocks. You are hoarding trash in your pockets. You are clearly confused. You are grieving Beatrice and your mind has snapped." She looked at Brandon. "We have a duty to protect him, don't we, honey?" "Yes, we do," Brandon said. He tapped the paper on the desk. "I spoke to our family doctor this morning, Dad. I told him about your erratic behavior, about the aggression, about the memory loss. He agreed that given your age and the trauma of Mom's death, this power of attorney is active. Legally, I am in charge. I own this house. I own your accounts. And I own those watches." He leaned in close to my face. "So if you call the police, I will show them this document. I will tell them you are having a senile episode. They will not arrest me, Dad. They will strap you to a gurney and take you to the psych ward for a 72-hour hold. Is that what you want?" I looked at the document. It was a trap. A legal snare I had walked into 5 years ago because I trusted my son. I looked at Vanessa. She was already mentally driving that yellow Porsche. I realized then that I could not win this fight in this room. If I fought them now physically or verbally, they would call the authorities and paint me as a danger to myself. They would lock me away before I could ever get to the bank. I had to play the part. I had to be the defeated old man one last time. I let my shoulders slump. I let the fire die out of my eyes. I looked down at the floor. "You are right," I whispered. I am just tired. I miss your mother. I don't know what I am doing." Brandon let go of my wrist. He smoothed his tracksuit. "Exactly," he said. "We know, Dad. We are doing this for you. You do not have to worry about money or decisions anymore. We will handle it." He picked up the tablet. "Now the van for Green Horizon will be here in an hour. Go sit in the kitchen and wait. Stay out of the mover's way." I nodded slowly. "Okay," I said. "Okay, Brandon. You win. Can I just have my wallet? It has your mother's picture in it." I pointed to the side table where I had left it the night before. Brandon picked up the old leather bifold. He opened it. He checked for cash. There was $20 inside. He laughed and took the $20 out, pocketing it. "Tax," he joked. He did not look in the secret fold. He did not see the cream-colored paper tucked behind the photo of Beatrice. He tossed the wallet at me. "Here," he said. "Now go. Sit. Be a good boy." I caught the wallet. I held it tight. "Thank you," I said. I walked out of the study. I walked past the movers who were carrying out the dining room table. I walked into the kitchen. It was empty. The back door was unlocked. I did not sit down. I did not wait for the van. I opened the back door quietly. I stepped out into the cold morning rain. I walked through the backyard past the garden Beatrice had loved, past the fence that needed painting. I reached the alleyway behind the house. I started walking. I did not look back. I was not Wallace, the confused old man, anymore. I was not the victim. I was the man with the paper. And I was going to the bank. The rain had soaked through my cardigan by the time I reached the heavy glass doors of the Chase Bank main branch downtown. I caught my reflection in the polished brass of the entryway. I looked like a specter. My hair was plastered to my skull, my clothes were wrinkled and stained with the mud from the alley, and my eyes were rimmed with the red exhaustion of a man who had just watched his life be dismantled. I did not look like Wallace King, the former federal auditor. I looked like a man who was coming in to beg for a warm place to sit. I pushed through the revolving door, and the silence of the bank hit me like a physical wall. It was the hushed, reverent silence of money. The air was cool and smelled of floor wax and ozone. Men in $3,000 suits whispered into phones, and women in pearls clicked their heels across the marble floor. When I stepped onto the carpet, the security guard near the ATM straightened up. His hand drifted instinctively to his belt. He saw a threat. He saw a vagrant. He did not see the man who had once audited the security firm he worked for. I ignored him. I walked straight to the teller line. There was only one window open, staffed by a young woman with perfectly manicured nails and an expression of bored disdain. She watched me approach with the look one gives a stray dog that has wandered into a cathedral. "Can I help you, sir?" she asked before I even reached the counter. Her tone made it clear that she could not help me and that she wanted me to leave. "I need to see Mr. Abernathy," I said. My voice was rough. "Mr. Abernathy is the branch manager," she said without looking up from her screen. "He does not see walk-in clients. If you want to open a checking account, I can give you a pamphlet." "I am not here for a pamphlet," I said. "Tell him Wallace King is here." She laughed, a short, sharp sound. "Sir, Mr. Abernathy is in a meeting with high net worth clients. I am going to have to ask you to leave before I call security. You are dripping on the floor." I looked at her. I looked at the guard who was now taking a step toward me. I realized that my name meant nothing anymore. To them, Wallace King was just a name in a database of pensioners, not a man of power. I had played the role of the poor old man so well that I had become him. I leaned forward. I placed my hands on the cold marble counter. "I am going to give you a sequence of numbers," I said. "You are going to type them into your terminal. If you do not, Mr. Abernathy will fire you before lunch." She blinked, surprised by the sudden steel in my voice. "Excuse me," she said. "Type this," I commanded. 7, 9, Alpha, Zulu, 4, 4, Omega, Red. She hesitated. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Curiosity, or perhaps fear, won out. She typed the code. I watched her face. I knew exactly what was happening on her screen. That code was not an account number. It was a legacy override. It was a code I had set up 30 years ago, deeply embedded in the banking system's architecture, reserved for assets that were classified as sensitive by the Treasury Department. Her eyes went wide. The reflection of her screen turned a bright, flashing crimson. A silent alarm triggered in the back office. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. The door to the manager's office flew open. Mr. Abernathy rushed out. He was a man who prided himself on composure, but he looked pale. He was adjusting his tie as he ran his eyes scanning the lobby frantically. He was looking for a senator or a diplomat. He saw me. He stopped. He looked at my wet clothes. He looked at the mud on my shoes. Mr. King, he whispered. He waved the security guard back. He rushed over to this counter and opened the gate himself. Come with me, he said. Quickly. He led me past the stunned teller and the staring customers into his corner office. He closed the heavy oak door and locked it. He closed the blinds. Mr. King, he said, gesturing to a leather chair, I apologize. That code, it hasn't been used in a decade. We thought you were dead. I am not dead, I said, sinking into the chair, though my son is trying his best to fix that. Abernathy went behind his desk. He did not offer me coffee. He looked terrified. Why are you here, Wallace? He asked, dropping the formalities. You know the protocols. You aren't supposed to walk in here unless the asset is compromised. The asset is compromised, I said. I reached into my wet pocket. I pulled out the leather wallet Brandon had tossed at me. I opened it and took out the folded cream-colored paper. It was damp at the edges and smelled faintly of coffee, but it was intact. I placed it on the glass desk. My son threw this in the garbage, I said. He thinks it is a railroad stock. He thinks it is worthless. Abernathy put on a pair of white cotton gloves from his drawer. He picked up the paper as if it were a religious artifact. He smoothed it out. He reached into his drawer and pulled out a heavy UV light. He clicked it on and swept it over the document. The room dimmed. Under the purple light, the cream paper transformed. Hidden fibers glowed in complex geometric patterns. A watermark appeared in the center, vivid and undeniable. It was the seal of the United States Treasury, but superimposed over it was a second seal, a black shield that signified a private holding trust. Abernathy read the glowing text aloud, his voice trembling. U.S. Treasury Bond, Series 1985, Asset Class 1, Value Unlimited Proxy. He clicked the light off. He looked at me. Do you have any idea what the current valuation of the King Logistics Trust is, Wallace? He asked. Wallace, I have not checked in 5 years, I said. Last time it was substantial. It is not just substantial, Abernathy said. With the compound interest and the shadow investments in tech during the 90s, Wallace, this piece of paper represents liquid assets north of $50 million. And because it is a bearer instrument, whoever holds this holds the power of signature. I nodded. I felt a grim satisfaction. $50 million, enough to buy the nursing home Brandon wanted to put me in and burn it to the ground. Enough to ruin him. Deposit it, I said. Put it in a new secure account under my name only. Revoke all existing power of attorneys attached to my profile. I want to freeze everything. Abernathy did not move to his computer. He did not type anything. He sat there staring at the paper. His face had gone from pale to a sick shade of gray. He looked up at me. There was no triumph in his eyes, only fear. I cannot deposit this, Wallace, he said. Why not, I asked. It is valid. It is, you just authenticated it. He reached under his desk. I heard a soft click. It was the sound of a magnetic lock engaging on the office door. He had locked us in. He pressed a red button on his phone console. Mr. Abernathy, I said, standing up. What are you doing? Wallace, listen to me, he said, his voice shaking. Sit down. Do not leave this room. Why? I demanded. Because 10 years ago, your son Brandon King came into this bank, Abernathy said. He had a notarized affidavit. He had a fire marshal's report. He claimed there was an electrical fire in your storage unit. He claimed this specific bond serial number ending in 889 was incinerated. I froze. A fire, I whispered. He filed an insurance claim, Wallace. A massive one. He claimed the bond was destroyed and he collected the payout. The insurance company paid him $200,000 for the face value of the lost instrument. My legs gave out. I sat back down. He collected insurance on it, I said. Yes, Abernathy said. And he signed a federal declaration stating that if the bond ever resurfaced, it would be considered proof of fraud. Major fraud. He looked at the paper on the desk. If I process this bond now, Wallace, the system automatically flags it. It means the fire was faked. It means the insurance claim was a lie. It means your son committed federal wire fraud and perjury. He looked at me with pity. I just triggered the silent alarm to the FBI Financial Crimes Division, Wallace. I had to. It is automatic protocol for a resurfaced bearer bond. I stared at the cream-colored paper. Brandon had not just thrown it away because he thought it was worthless. He threw it away because he thought he had already squeezed the juice out of it. He had stolen from me 10 years ago, lied to the federal government, and then when he found the evidence of his own crime in my desk, he tried to bury it in the trash. He kept it, I whispered. He didn't destroy it back then. He kept it hidden in my desk, probably hoping to cash it twice and then forgot about it. And now you brought it into a bank, Abernathy said. Sirens began to wail in the distance, getting closer. You did not just bring me a deposit, Wallace Abernathy said softly. You brought me a crime scene. The police are on their way, and they are not coming for you. They are coming for the man who signed that insurance claim. I leaned back in the chair. I thought about the yellow Porsche. I thought about the way Brandon had looked at me when he said I was a liability. Let them come, I said. I looked at Abernathy. Call them, I said. Tell them I am here. Tell them I have the paper. But Wallace Abernathy stammered. This will destroy him. He will go to federal prison for decades. I looked at the coffee stains on the bond. I remembered the sound of the grandfather clock chiming as they dragged it away. He made his choice, I said. He sold his father for a car. Now he is going to pay the bill. The sirens stopped right outside the building. Heavy boots hit the marble floor of the lobby. I took a sip of the water Abernathy had on his desk. Open the door, I said. I am ready to give my statement. The silence in the bank manager's office was broken only by the sound of sirens cutting through the heavy rain outside. Mr. Abernathy sat across from me, his face a mask of nervous sweat and professional dread. The cream-colored paper lay between us like a loaded weapon. I stared at it. I looked at the coffee stain on the corner and the creases where my son had crushed it. 10 years ago, I said, my voice low and steady. 10 years ago, we had a fire in the detached garage. It was an electrical short. That is what the fire marshal said. Abernathy shook his head slowly. He pulled a file from his computer screen and turned the monitor so I could see. It was not an electrical short, Mr. King. It was arson. But it was never proven. Your son filed the claim. He submitted a sworn affidavit, stating that the contents of the safe in the garage were incinerated. He specifically listed this bond by serial number. He claimed it was reduced to ash. I read the screen. I saw the dates. I saw the payout amount. $200,000. He burned down my workshop, I whispered. He burned my tools. He burned Beatrice's gardening supplies. And he claimed he lost this paper. But he never put it in the garage, did he? No, Abernathy said softly. He kept it. He filed a fraudulent claim, collected the insurance money, and then he kept the physical bond. It is the oldest greed in the book, Wallace. He wanted to get paid twice. He probably planned to wait a decade and try to cash it overseas or sell it on the black market. But he forgot about it. Or maybe he got scared. And today I continued finishing the thought. Today he found it in my desk and threw it away because he thought it was worthless. He thought the fraud was buried so deep that the paper was just trash. The door to the office opened. It was not a uniformed officer who walked in. It was a man in a charcoal suit. He had the tired, sharp eyes of someone who spent his life chasing money trails. He flashed a badge. Special Agent Miller, FBI Financial Crimes Division. He looked at me then at the bond on the desk. He did not pull out handcuffs. He pulled out a pair of gloves and an evidence bag. "Mr. King," Agent Miller said, his voice calm. "Mr. Abernathy briefed me on the phone. This is a very interesting situation." He picked up the bond and examined it under the light. "If you had walked in here trying to cash this 10 years ago, we would have arrested you," he said. "But you are walking in here today after your son declared it destroyed. That changes the narrative." He looked me in the eye. "Your son committed federal wire fraud, insurance fraud, and perjury. That is a 20-year sentence right there. But if we arrest him now, he will lawyer up. He will claim he made a mistake. He will claim he thought it was lost and then found it. He will try to wiggle out." I leaned forward. The old instincts of the auditor were waking up inside me. The part of me that knew how to trap a rat. "What do you want, Agent Miller?" I asked. "I want him to dig the hole deeper," Miller said. "I want him to incriminate himself on the current timeline. We need to catch him in the act of trying to defraud you right now." My phone began to buzz in my pocket. It vibrated against my leg like an angry insect. I pulled it out. The screen lit up with Brandon's name. Miller looked at the phone. Then he looked at me. "Answer it," he said. "But do not tell him you are here. Do not tell him about the bond. Let him talk. Let him threaten you. We need to establish that he is coercing you. We need to establish that he is declaring you incompetent to cover his tracks." I looked at Abernathy. The banker nodded, terrified but compliant. I pressed the green button. I put the phone on speaker and laid it on the glass desk next to the evidence of my son's crime. "Hello, Brandon," I said. My voice was raspy. I sounded exactly like the tired old man he thought I was. "Dad." "Where the hell are you?" Brandon screamed. His voice filled the small office. The distortion of the speaker made him sound even more unhinged. I am just walking, son," I said. "I needed some air." "You needed air," he shouted. "You are not allowed to just wander off. Do you know what time it is? The intake coordinator from Green Horizon is calling me. They have your bed ready. The van is on its way to the house." I looked at Agent Miller. He was taking notes, his pen moving fast across a yellow pad. "I do not want to go to Green Horizon, Brandon," I said. "I want to stay in my home." "It is not your home anymore, Dad," Brandon yelled. "It is sold. The papers are signed. You have no legal standing. You are confused. You are having an episode." He paused and his voice dropped to a menacing hiss. "Listen to me, old man. If you are not back at this house in 10 minutes, I am calling the police. I will tell them you are a danger to yourself. I will tell them you threatened me. I will have you committed involuntarily to the psych ward. Do you understand me?" I looked at the bond. I looked at the federal agent. I looked at the reflection of my own face in the darkened window. "I understand," I said. "Good," Brandon snapped. "Now get back here. And bring that wallet. Vanessa thinks you might have taken a credit card and we need to check." The line went dead. Silence returned to the room. Agent Miller stopped writing. He looked up at me with a strange mixture of pity and respect. "He just threatened to file a false police report," Miller said. "He just admitted to coercing you into a facility. He just admitted to seizing your property without your consent." He tapped the notepad. "Mr. King, we have enough to pick him up. But if you go back there, if you let him think he has won, he might lead us to the rest of the money. The insurance payout from 10 years ago, we never found where he hid it." I stood up. My knees popped. I felt the weight of my 70 years, but I also felt a surge of cold adrenaline. "I will go back," I said. Miller stood up too. "We will have a team outside," he said. "We will wire you up. We need you to get him to say it to your face. We need him to admit that he is selling the house to cover his debts. We need him to admit he thinks you are helpless." I buttoned my damp cardigan. He thinks I am a senile old man who hoards trash, I said. I picked up my cane. I am going to let him believe it. I am going to let him think he has won everything. And then I am going to watch his face when he realizes he has lost. Give me the wire, Agent Miller. Miller opened his briefcase and pulled out a small black device. This is going to be dangerous, Mr. King, he warned. If he figures it out. He won't figure it out, I said. He never looks at me. He only looks through me. I attached the wire under my shirt. I fixed my collar. I looked at Mr. Abernathy. Keep that bond safe, I said. It is in the vault, Wallace Abernathy said. It is not going anywhere. I walked out of the office. The bank lobby was empty now, except for the agents who had quietly secured the perimeter. I stepped back out into the rain. I started the long walk back to the house that was no longer my home. I was walking back into the lion's den, but this time I was not the prey. I was the hunter, and the trap was set. I walked back up the driveway of the house that Beatrice and I had bought 40 years ago. The rain was coming down harder now, washing away the tire tracks of the moving truck, but it could not wash away the feeling of emptiness that radiated from the windows. The house looked like a skull picked clean. No curtains, no warmth, just a hollow shell waiting for the bulldozer. I felt the cold plastic of the wire taped to my chest. It pressed against my skin with every beat of my heart, a constant reminder that I was no longer just a father. I was an informant. Agent Miller was parked down the street in an unmarked van, listening to every breath I took. I adjusted my wet cardigan, making sure the microphone was covered, and gripped the handle of my cane. I had to be convincing. I had to be the confused, pathetic old man one last time. I opened the front door. The hallway echoed with the sound of the latch clicking. The rugs were gone, exposing the hardwood floors that I had refinished myself 20 years ago. The smell of the house had changed. The scent of lavender and old paper was gone, replaced by the sharp chemical stink of cleaning fluid and the stale odor of stress. They were waiting for me in the living room, or what used to be the living room. Now it was just a square of empty space with 2 folding chairs set up in the middle like an interrogation room. Brandon was pacing back and forth, his expensive sneakers squeaking on the wood. Vanessa was sitting on one of the chairs, scrolling through her phone with a look of intense boredom that masked a simmering rage. When I stepped into the room, Brandon stopped pacing. He spun around, and his face twisted into a snarl. "Where the hell have you been?" he shouted. His voice bounced off the bare walls, making it sound twice as loud. I shuffled forward, leaning heavily on the cane. I let my hand tremble. I just went for a walk, Brandon," I stammered. "I got confused. I wanted to see the park one last time." "A walk," he repeated, mocking me. "You disappeared for 2 hours, Dad. Do you know what kind of chaos you caused? The intake nurse from Green Horizon called 3 times. If we missed that window, you would be sleeping on the street tonight." Vanessa stood up. She walked over to me, her heels clicking sharply. She stopped inches from my face, invading my personal space. She smelled of expensive perfume and cruelty. "Stop lying, Wallace," she spat. "You were not at the park. You are soaking wet and you have mud on your shoes. You were wandering around like a stray dog, hoping someone would feel sorry for you. Well, nobody cares." She reached into her oversized designer bag and pulled out a thick, stapled document. She thrust it toward my chest, hitting me with it. "Take it," she ordered. I took the paperwork with shaking hands. "What is this?" I asked. "It is the final sale agreement for the house," she said, "and the admission forms for the facility. We need your signature on the intake forms. The power of attorney covers the house, but the nursing home requires a voluntary admission signature, so they do not have to deal with state auditors." I looked at the papers. The print was small and blurry to my tired eyes, but I saw the words voluntary surrender of assets and hospice care liability waiver. They were not just putting me in a home. They were signing away my right to sue them if I died of neglect. "Sign it," Brandon barked. "Right now. We have a pen." I looked at him, and if I do not sign, I asked softly. Brandon laughed. It was a sound devoid of any humor. "If you do not sign, Dad, then Vanessa and I get in the car and drive away. We leave you here in this empty house with no heat, no electricity, and no food. And when the new owner comes tomorrow morning, he calls the cops to drag you out for trespassing. You end up in a homeless shelter or under a bridge." He stepped closer, towering over me. "Those are your options. Green Horizon implies a bed and Jell-O cups. The bridge implies freezing to death. Pick one." I felt the wire burn against my skin. Agent Miller was hearing every word. He was hearing the coercion. He was hearing the threat of abandonment. It was enough for a case of elder abuse. But I needed more. I needed the financial crime. I needed him to admit to the fraud. I reached into the pocket of my cardigan. My fingers brushed against the piece of paper Agent Miller had given me before I left the bank. It was a high-quality color facsimile of the bond printed on heavy stock. To the naked eye in a dim room, it looked identical to the one I had left in the vault. I pulled it out slowly, unfolding it with exaggerated care. "Brandon," I said, my voice wavering, "before I sign, I wanted to ask you again." I held the paper up. My hand shook violently, making the paper rustle. "I found this in my pocket. I forgot to throw it away." "Are you sure? Are you absolutely sure it is worthless? It looks so official. Maybe we could take it to the bank. Maybe it could pay for a better home." The reaction was immediate and explosive. Brandon's eyes bulged. His face turned a shade of red that bordered on purple. He looked at that paper like it was a live grenade. "Are you kidding me?" he screamed. He lunged at me. He did not ask for the paper. He snatched it out of my hand with such force that he almost knocked me over. "I told you to throw this away," he yelled. "I told you it is garbage. Why are you obsessed with this trash?" He looked at the paper in his hand. For a second, I saw a flash of genuine terror in his eyes. He recognized it. He remembered the fire. He remembered the insurance check he had cashed 10 years ago. Seeing it here in his father's hand alive and whole must have felt like seeing a ghost. But his arrogance crushed his fear. He convinced himself again that I was just a senile old man who had found a piece of scrap. "It is a railroad stock, Dad," he shouted, trying to convince himself as much as me. "It is worthless paper. It is nothing." He did not just crumble it this time. He gripped the top corner and ripped. The sound of the heavy paper tearing was loud in the empty room. He tore it in half. Then he tore the halves. He threw the pieces onto the floor and stomped on them, grinding his expensive sneaker into the hardwood, destroying the image of the treasury seal. There he panted. "It is gone. It is destroyed. Are you happy now? Can we focus on reality now?" I looked down at the torn paper under his foot. "You should not have done that, son," I whispered. He laughed. "You are crazy. You are absolutely senile. It is paper, Dad. Now sign the damn forms or get out of my sight." Vanessa kicked a piece of the torn paper toward me. "He is right, Wallace," she said. "Stop living in a fantasy world where you have money. You are broke. You are a burden. Sign the papers so we can finally be done with you." I looked up at the ceiling where the smoke detector used to be. I knew there was a fiber optic camera lens drilled into the molding of the doorframe behind me, installed by Miller's team 20 minutes ago while the house was empty. They had it. They had him on video destroying what he believed to be a financial instrument. They had him destroying evidence of his own insurance fraud. I looked back at Brandon. "I will sign," I said. I took the pen from Vanessa. I bent over the folding chair and signed my name on the admission form. But I did not sign Wallace King. I signed a name I had used in my undercover days, a name that would signal to any auditor that the document was signed under duress. I handed the clipboard back to Vanessa. "Good," she said, checking the signature without reading it. Finally. She put the papers in her bag. "The van will be here in 10 minutes, Brandon said, checking his watch. He sounded relieved, but his eyes kept darting back to the torn paper on the floor. He was spooked. He wanted to get out of there. "I am going to wait outside," I said. "The smell of the cleaning fluid. It is making me dizzy." "Fine," Brandon said. "Wait on the porch. Do not wander off again." I walked to the door. I stepped out onto the porch. The rain had stopped, but the sky was heavy and gray. I did not wait for the van. I walked down the steps and stood on the sidewalk. I saw the unmarked van down the street start its engine. I saw a black SUV turn the corner, and then another. Brandon and Vanessa walked out of the house behind me, locking the door. "We are going to wait in our car," Brandon said. "We do not want to get wet." They walked toward their BMW. Brandon paused. He looked at me. "You know, Dad," he said, his voice almost conversational. "This is for the best. You will see. In a week you won't even remember this house." I looked at him. "I will remember everything, Brandon," I said. He frowned, confused by the clarity in my voice. Before he could answer, the black SUVs screeched to a halt in front of the driveway, blocking the BMW. Doors flew open. Men in windbreakers with yellow letters on the back spilled out. "FBI. Don't move." Brandon froze his hand on the car door handle. Vanessa dropped her coffee cup. It shattered on the driveway, spilling brown liquid over her expensive shoes. I leaned on my cane and watched. The audit was over. It was time for the collections department. The van for Green Horizon never came. It was another lie, another manipulation to break my spirit. After I signed the papers, Brandon did not let me wait on the porch. He grabbed me by the arm, his grip bruising my thin skin, and dragged me back inside. He told me the facility was full until Monday. He told me he could not have a senile old man wandering the streets while he hosted the most important night of his career. So he shoved me down the steep wooden stairs into the basement storage room. It was a cold, windowless cell where we used to keep the holiday decorations and the extra dining chairs. He locked the door from the outside. A moment later, the slot at the bottom opened, and a paper plate slid across the dusty concrete. On it was a single sandwich made of stale white bread and a slice of bologna that had started to curl at the edges. "Eat up, Dad!" Brandon shouted through the door. "And stay quiet. I have investors coming. If I hear one peep out of you, I will turn off the ventilation." I did not eat the sandwich. I sat on a stack of old magazines in the dark, listening to the transformation happening above my head. I heard the caterers arrive. I heard the clinking of expensive crystal and the heavy thud of cases of wine being set down. I heard the string quartet warming up, playing the same Mozart piece Beatrice had loved. They were turning my home into a stage. Around 8 o'clock, the guests began to arrive. The floorboards above me creaked under the weight of Italian leather shoes and designer heels. The murmur of conversation drifted down through the ventilation shaft, carrying with it the scent of roasted duck and expensive perfume. It was a smell I knew well from my days auditing corporate galas, where executives celebrated profits made from stolen pensions. I stood up and walked to the vent. I could hear Brandon's voice, clear and confident. He was holding court. "Yes, this is the family estate," he was saying. "We are planning a complete renovation. Open concept, smart home integration, the works. It is a prime asset." I convinced my father it was time to pass the torch. "And where is Wallace?" a man asked. "I haven't seen him at the club in ages." Brandon laughed, a smooth, practiced sound. "Oh, Dad is living his best life. We sent him to Europe, a grand tour. Paris, Rome, Vienna. He has always wanted to go. He is probably sipping espresso by the Seine right now, enjoying his retirement. Europe. He had sent me to a cold basement with a bologna sandwich, and he was telling his investors I was in Paris. The audacity was almost impressive. It was the lie of a man who believed he was untouchable. Then I heard Vanessa's voice. It was closer, right above the vent. "Thank you," she was saying. "Yes, they are vintage. Family heirlooms. Brandon's mother left them to me. She always said I was the daughter she never had." I froze. I knew what she was talking about. Beatrice had only one piece of jewelry that mattered. A string of Mikimoto pearls I had bought her in Tokyo 30 years ago. I had caught Vanessa looking at them in the jewelry box the day of the funeral. She had told me she threw them out because the clasp was broken. She had called them costume jewelry junk. Now she was wearing them. She was parading around my house wearing my wife's pearls, telling strangers lies about a woman she had despised. That was the moment the last thread of my restraint snapped. I was not going to wait for the FBI to kick down the door. I was not going to wait for Agent Miller to give the signal. I was done waiting. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the paperclip I had swiped from the bank manager's desk earlier that day. It was a small, flimsy piece of metal, but in the hands of a man who understands leverage, it was a key. I had learned how to pick a simple tumbler lock during an audit of a secure storage facility in the 90s. A bored security guard had taught me. "It is all about tension," he had said. "Apply pressure and listen for the click." I knelt by the door. The lock was old, a simple privacy latch installed 40 years ago. I straightened the paperclip, bending the tip into a small hook. I inserted it into the keyhole. I applied tension to the knob with my left hand and raked the pins with my right. Click. The knob turned. I opened the door slowly, inch by inch. I did not want it to squeak. I stepped out into the main basement area. The stairs loomed ahead, leading up to the light and the noise of the party. I smoothed my cardigan. I wiped the dust from my trousers. I ran a hand through my thinning hair. I did not look like a guest. I looked like a ghost. I climbed the stairs. 1 step, 2 steps. My heart was beating a slow, steady rhythm. It was the rhythm of the takedown. I reached the door at the top of the stairs, which opened into the kitchen. I turned the handle. It was unlocked. I stepped into the kitchen. It was full of catering staff in black uniforms rushing back and forth with trays of hors d'oeuvres. They stopped when they saw me. A collective silence rippled through the room. They saw an old man in dirty clothes emerging from the cellar. One of them, a young waiter, dropped a silver spoon. It clattered loudly on the tile. I ignored them. I walked past the trays of canapés and the bottles of champagne. I pushed open the swinging doors that led to the living room. The party was in full swing. There were at least 50 people. Men in suits, women in cocktail dresses. The room was bathed in warm golden light. And there, in the center of it all, was my family. Brandon was holding a glass of scotch, raising it in a toast. He looked triumphant. He looked like a king. To the future, he bellowed. To growth. To legacy. Vanessa was standing beside him, her hand resting on his arm. And around her neck, glowing softly in the chandelier light, were Beatrice's pearls. They looked beautiful. They looked pure. And on Vanessa's neck, they looked like a noose. I stepped into the room. I did not shout. I did not run. I just walked to the center of the Persian rug. "Excuse me," I said. My voice was not loud, but it cut through the chatter like a knife. The string quartet stopped playing. The conversation died away. Heads turned. Brandon lowered his glass. He squinted at me through the dim light. For a second, he looked confused, as if he really believed his own lie that I was in Europe. Then reality crashed in. His face went white. "Dad," he whispered. Vanessa gasped. Her hand flew to her throat, covering the pearls. I looked at the crowd. I saw the shock in their eyes. "I am sorry to interrupt the toast," I said. I looked at Brandon. "I hope the weather in Paris is nice this time of year, because the ventilation in the basement is terrible." Brandon laughed, a high-pitched, nervous sound. "Ladies and gentlemen," he stammered, stepping forward to block me from view. This is my father. He has returned early. As I mentioned, he is suffering from severe dementia. He wanders. He gets confused." He signaled to the security guard he had hired for the door. "Please escort him to his room," Brandon said, his voice tight with panic. "He needs his medication." The guard, a burly man in a black blazer, stepped toward me. I did not move. I lifted my chin. "I do not need medication, Brandon," I said. "And I did not just return from Europe. I just climbed up the stairs from the storage room where you locked me in 3 hours ago. You gave me a bologna sandwich and told me to shut up so you could sell my house." A gasp went through the room. Vanessa stepped forward, her eyes blazing. "He is lying," she hissed. "He is sick. Look at him. He is filthy. He dug those clothes out of the trash." I looked at her. I looked at the pearls. "Those are beautiful pearls, Vanessa," I said. "Beatrice wore them on our 40th anniversary. You told me you threw them away. You told me they were junk." I took a step closer to her. "Did you take them out of the trash too?" I asked. "Or did you steal them from her jewelry box while her body was still warm?" Vanessa took a step back. She looked at the guests who were now staring at her neck. Brandon grabbed my arm. His fingers dug into my bicep. "That is enough," he growled in my ear. "Get out. Get out, or I will drag you out." I looked at my son. I saw the fear behind his anger. He knew the house of cards was shaking. "You can drag me out, Brandon," I said calmly. "But you cannot drag out the truth." I pulled my arm free. I looked at the investors, the men in suits who held Brandon's future in their checkbooks. "My son told you this house is his," I said. "He told you I passed the torch." I reached into my pocket. I did not pull out the bond. That was for the FBI. I pulled out the deed to the house which I had grabbed from the desk before they locked me away. It was a copy, but it was enough. "This house belongs to the King Trust," I said. "And as of this morning, the trust is under federal audit for insurance fraud committed by the beneficiary." I looked at Brandon. "You do not own this house, son. You do not own the land. You do not even own the suit on your back. It was all bought with lies, and the bill has come due." The room was silent, deadly silent. Then the front door opened. It was not the police. Not yet. It was a woman in a sharp navy suit carrying a briefcase. She walked in with the air of someone who owned every room she entered. It was Katerina Voss, my lawyer, the shark I had hired 30 years ago to protect my assets from people exactly like my son. She looked at me. She looked at Brandon. She smiled. "Good evening," she said. "I believe we have some business to discuss." And I brought the eviction notice. The room went deathly silent as I stood in the center of the Persian rug, my dirty cardigan contrasting sharply with the tuxedos and evening gowns surrounding me. I could feel the eyes of 50 strangers burning into my skin. They were looking at me with a mixture of horror and pity, the way one looks at a car accident. But I was not looking at them. I was looking at my son. Brandon's face had drained of all color. The glass of scotch in his hand trembled, sending ripples through the amber liquid. For a split second, he looked like a child caught stealing from the cookie jar, but then the survival instinct of the con artist kicked in. He set his jaw. He forced a smile that looked more like a rictus of pain. "Dad," he exclaimed, his voice pitching too high. "Oh my God, you are having an episode." He turned to the crowd, spreading his hands in a gesture of helpless apology. I am so sorry, everyone. My father, he has these spells. Advanced dementia. He gets confused about where he is. He wanders off and gets dirty, and then he invents these wild stories. He signaled frantically to the security guard standing by the door. Get him, he hissed. Get him out of here before he hurts himself. He is delirious. The guard and a large man with a thick neck started moving toward me. He looked like he was ready to tackle me. I knew I could not physically fight him. I was 70 years old, and my knees were aching from the damp basement floor. But I did not need to fight him. I just needed to be louder than him. I saw the lead singer of the jazz quartet standing near the fireplace. He was holding a wireless microphone loosely in his hand, watching the scene unfold with wide eyes. I moved. I moved faster than anyone expected an old man to move. I sidestepped the coffee table and reached for the singer. Give me that, I said. The singer was too stunned to argue. He handed me the microphone. I gripped it tight. I turned to face the room. The feedback squealed a sharp, piercing noise that made everyone cover their ears. It was the sound of authority. I am not delirious, I said. My voice boomed through the speakers, filling every corner of the house. And I am certainly not in Europe. Brandon lunged toward me. Dad, stop it, put that down. I took a step back, keeping the microphone close to my lips. I looked directly at the man in the gray suit who had asked about me earlier. My son told you I was in Paris, I said. He told you I was enjoying my retirement. The truth is, I have been 10 feet below you for the last 3 hours. A murmur rippled through the crowd. I pointed to the floor. I was locked in the storage cellar. I continued, my voice steady and cold. My son shoved me down there. He locked the door. He threw me a bologna sandwich on a paper plate and told me to keep my mouth shut while he sold my home out from under me. Lies, Brandon shouted. He is lying. It is the dementia talking. He thinks he is in a movie. He tried to grab the microphone, but I swung away. He stole my pension, I said louder. He forged my signature on a power of attorney document 5 years ago. He used it this morning to sell my watch collection to a buyer in Dubai. He used the money to put a down payment on the BMW parked in the driveway. The room was freezing over. The guests were stepping back, creating a circle around us. They were no longer looking at me with pity. They were looking at Brandon with suspicion. He is not a successful investor, I said. He is a thief. And this house does not belong to him. It belongs to me. And I never signed the deed. That was the breaking point. The facade was cracking, and Vanessa knew it. I saw her face twist. The elegant socialite mask melted away, revealing the desperate, vicious woman beneath. She had been standing by the fireplace, clutching her purse, but now she moved. She marched across the room, her heels stabbing into the carpet. Her eyes were wild. She looked like a cornered animal. She did not try to grab the microphone. She did not try to argue. She wanted to hurt me. She wanted to silence me in the only way she knew how. She stopped right in front of me. She smelled of fear and expensive champagne. "Shut up!" she screamed. She raised her hand. I saw the flash of the diamond ring I had supposedly bought her for their engagement. She swung. The slap echoed through the room like a gunshot. It hit me square on the cheek. My glasses flew off my face and skittered across the floor. The sting was immediate and hot. My head snapped to the side. The crowd gasped. It was a collective intake of breath that sucked the air out of the room. Vanessa stood there, her chest heaving, her hand still raised. "Shut your mouth, you senile old bat!" she shrieked. "You are ruining everything. We gave you everything. We took care of you. And this is how you repay us. You humiliate us. You are ungrateful. You are worthless." She was panting, her face red and distorted. I did not touch my cheek. I did not pick up my glasses. I stood tall. I looked at her through blurry eyes. I looked at the pearls around her neck. My wife's pearls. The room was deadly silent. No one moved. The violence of the act had paralyzed everyone. I slowly brought the microphone back to my lips. "You hit me," I said softly. My voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. "You hit your husband's father, in his own home, in front of 50 witnesses. I pointed to the pearls, and you did it wearing my dead wife's jewelry, the jewelry you told me you threw in the trash." Vanessa looked down at the pearls. Her hand flew to her throat, as if they were suddenly burning her skin. She realized her mistake. She realized she had just assaulted an elderly man in a room full of potential investors and lawyers. She looked around the room. She saw the faces of the guests. They were looking at her with pure disgust. A woman in a red dress turned away, covering her mouth. A man in a suit took out his phone and started typing. Brandon rushed to her side. He grabbed her arm. "Vanessa," he hissed. "What did you do?" She pulled away from him. "It is his fault," she screamed, pointing at me. "He pushed me. He is crazy. He is ruining our lives, Brandon. Do something. Get him out of here." Brandon looked at me. He looked at the guests. He looked at the security guard who had stopped moving, unsure of what to do. "Dad, please," Brandon said, his voice cracking. Just give me the mic. Let's go to the kitchen. We can talk about this. Please." He was begging now. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the pathetic desperation of a child caught in a lie. I looked at him. I touched the burning skin of my cheek. "There is nothing to talk about, son," I said. I looked toward the front door where Katerina Voss, my lawyer, was standing. She had watched the entire thing. She had seen the slap. She had heard the admission. Beside her stood a man in a windbreaker with a gold badge on his belt. I lowered the microphone. "I think you have guests," I said. I walked past Vanessa, who was now trembling. I walked past Brandon, who was staring at the floor. I bent down and picked up my glasses. I put them on. The world came back into focus. And it was time to end it. The heavy oak front door did not just open, it swung wide with the force of a breaching ram. But it was not the police who stepped through the frame. It was something far more terrifying for a boss like Brandon, who built his life on fine print and loopholes. It was Katerina Voss. She walked into the foyer like a general inspecting a conquered city. She was wearing a midnight blue suit that cost more than my son's car. Her gray hair was pulled back in a severe knot, and her eyes behind rimless glasses scanned the room with laser precision, assessing the damage and identifying the targets. Behind her marched a phalanx of 4 paralegals in matching gray suits, each carrying a thick leather briefcase. They moved in perfect synchronization, a legal hit squad descending on the party. Brandon, who was still holding his cheek where the reality of the situation was starting to sink in, tried to regain his composure. He stepped forward, trying to physically block her path. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice cracking. "This is a private event. You cannot just walk in here. Security, get them out." The security guard looked at Katerina. Then he looked at the pin on her lapel. He recognized the logo of Voss and Sterling, the most ruthless corporate law firm in the state. He took a step back. He was paid $20 an hour. He was not paid enough to fight Katerina Voss. Katerina did not even look at Brandon. She walked right past him as if he were a piece of furniture. She walked straight into the center of the living room where I stood. She looked at me. She looked at the red mark on my face. She nodded once, a silent acknowledgement that the game was now live. Then she turned to the guests. She did not shout. She did not need to. Her voice was the cool, calm tone of a person who holds the detonator. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, "I apologize for the disruption. My name is Katerina Voss. I am the lead counsel for the King Logistics Trust." A murmur went through the crowd. The name King Logistics meant nothing to them 5 minutes ago. Now it hung in the air like smoke. "I strongly suggest you put down your drinks," she continued, "because you are currently trespassing on federal evidence. One of the investors, a man with a red face and a diamond watch, stepped forward. Trespassing, he blustered. We are guests of the owner. Brandon King owns this property. We are celebrating his acquisition. Katerina smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of a shark that just smelled blood in the water. She snapped her fingers. One of the paralegals stepped forward and opened a briefcase. He handed her a document. Brandon King owns nothing, she said. She held the document up for the room to see. This is a title search completed 15 minutes ago at the county clerk's digital archive. The deed to this house was never transferred to Brandon King. The transfer application he submitted yesterday was flagged for fraud and rejected at 4:58 p.m. today. Brandon gasped. He lunged forward, trying to snatch the paper. That is a lie, he screamed. I have the power of attorney. He signed it. It is legal. Katerina sidestepped him effortlessly. Your power of attorney was revoked at 4:30 p.m., she said calmly. By the principal, Mr. Wallace King. She pointed at me. And furthermore, she continued addressing the stunned investors. Any contracts, any investment agreements, or any promissory notes you signed with Brandon King using this property or his father's assets as collateral are void ab initio. They are worthless, because you cannot pledge assets you do not own. The room erupted. The men in suits started pulling out their phones, frantically dialing their lawyers. The woman in the red dress dropped her champagne glass. It shattered on the floor next to Vanessa's feet, but Vanessa did not move. She was staring at Katerina with the look of a woman watching a tsunami approach from the beach. Wait, the red-faced investor shouted. I wired him a deposit this morning, $200,000 for the buy-in. He said the assets were liquid. Katerina looked at him with pity. I hope you have good fraud insurance, sir, she said, because that money is likely already in a crypto wallet in the Cayman Islands. And unless you act very quickly, you will never see it again. Brandon was shaking. He looked at the investors. He looked at the walls of the house he thought he had stolen. This is a setup, he yelled. My father is senile. He does not know what he is doing. He is being manipulated by this woman. She is trying to steal the estate. He pointed a trembling finger at me. He threw away his fortune, he screamed. He threw it in the trash. I saw him. He is crazy. He thinks he has millions, but he has nothing. Katerina laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. She reached into her own briefcase. She pulled out a high-resolution color copy of the cream-colored paper. She had it mounted on a piece of foam board like an exhibit in a murder trial. She held it up. Is this what you are talking about, Brandon? She asked. Brandon stared at the image. It was the bond. The treasury bond he had torn up an hour ago. The bond he had claimed was destroyed in a fire 10 years ago. You have a copy, he whispered. It doesn't matter. I tore up the original. It is confetti. It is gone. Without the physical paper, he has nothing. Katerina shook her head slowly. You really do not understand how this works, do you? She said. She walked over to the fireplace where the jazz quartet had stopped playing. She placed the image on the mantel. This document, she said, her voice projecting to the back of the room, is a bearer power bond, Series 1985. It is a very rare financial instrument issued to private contractors who worked high-level government logistics during the Cold War. She looked at the investors. They were listening intently now. They knew money. They knew power. And they knew they were in the presence of something they did not understand. This bond does not just represent monetary value, she explained. It represents control. The holder of this bond possesses the unlimited proxy for the King Logistics Trust. That means whoever holds the physical paper has absolute veto power over every asset in the trust. They can freeze accounts. They can revoke deeds. They can unilaterally dissolve the trust. She looked at Brandon. Your father did not bring the original bond home, Brandon. He is not stupid. He deposited the original bond into the master vault at Chase Bank at 4:50 p.m. today. Brandon's knees buckled. He grabbed the back of a sofa to stay standing. No, he whispered. No. I saw him with it. He had it in the living room. I tore it up. Katerina smiled. You tore up a color photocopy, Brandon. A proposition. Bait. And you took it. She turned back to the room. When Mr. King deposited the bond, he activated the proxy clause. That action instantly froze every asset linked to his social security number. It locked the house. It locked the pension. It locked the bank accounts you have been draining for 5 years. She took a step toward the red-faced investor. Sir, you asked where your $200,000 went. I can tell you. It went into an account that is now under federal lock and key, and the man who convinced you to send it has committed securities fraud, wire fraud, and theft by deception. The investor turned to Brandon. His face was purple with rage. You told me you owned the trust, he roared. You told me your father was a silent partner. I am, Brandon stammered. I was going to be. It was just a formality. Katerina cut him off. The only formality left, she said, is your arraignment. She snapped her fingers again. The paralegals opened their briefcases. They began handing out papers to the guests. These are cease and desist orders, she said. If you are holding any contracts signed by Brandon King regarding this property, you are hereby notified that they are invalid. If you attempt to enforce them, you will be named as co-conspirators in a federal racketeering investigation. The guests dropped the papers Brandon had given them earlier. They backed away from him as if he were radioactive. Vanessa suddenly came to life. She realized the ship was sinking, and she was not going to go down with it. I didn't know, she screamed. Her voice was shrill and desperate. She looked at the investors pleadingly. I didn't know anything about the bond. Brandon told me the house was his. He told me his father gave it to him. I am a victim here too. I stepped forward. I looked at my daughter-in-law. You are wearing my wife's pearls, I said quietly. You told me you threw them away. You lied to my face while you wore them to a party in my house. Vanessa clutched the pearls. I found them, she lied. I saved them. I was going to give them back. You were going to sell them, Katerina interrupted. We have your search history, Vanessa. We know you sent photos of those pearls to a fence in New York yesterday. We know you were planning to ship them tomorrow morning. That is trafficking in stolen goods. Vanessa burst into tears. Ugly, selfish tears. Brandon looked at me. His eyes were wide and wet. He looked like a trapped animal. Dad, stop this, he begged. You can stop this. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. Tell them you gave me permission. Please, Dad. I will lose everything. I will go to jail. I looked at the son I had raised. I looked at the man who had shoved me into a cellar and fed me a bologna sandwich. You already lost everything, Brandon, I said. You lost it the moment you decided I was worth more dead than alive. Katerina checked her watch. Mr. King, she said to me, the authorities are 3 minutes away. The bank manager, Mr. Abernathy, just confirmed that the federal warrant has been issued. She looked at the crowd. I suggest you all leave, she said, unless you want to be interviewed by the FBI as witnesses to a felony. The stampede was immediate. The investors, the socialites, the hangers-on, they all rushed for the door. They pushed past the security guard who had already taken off his blazer and was trying to blend in with the crowd. They left their half-finished drinks and their plates of food. Within 60 seconds, the room was empty. Only Brandon, Vanessa, Katerina, her team, and I remained. The silence in the room was heavy. The party decorations looked grotesque now. The champagne tower was a monument to a celebration that never happened. Brandon sank onto the sofa. He put his head in his hands. Why, Dad, he sobbed. Why did you do this? You could have just given me the money. You have millions. Why did you have to destroy me? I walked over to him. I stood over him leaning on my cane. Because you didn't ask for help, son, I said. You demanded it. You stole it. And then you tried to throw me away like garbage. I reached out and gently took the glass of scotch from his hand. I placed it on the table. The money in that trust was for you, I said softly. It was always for you. I was waiting for you to grow up. I was waiting for you to show me you could build something honest. If you had come to me, if you had just been kind, I would have given you the world. Brandon looked up. The realization hit him. The magnitude of his mistake crushed him. I didn't know, he whispered. I know, I said. And that is the tragedy. Sirens wailed in the distance, louder this time. They were coming up the driveway. Blue and red lights flashed against the living room window, illuminating the empty party. Katerina stepped back, giving us space. It is over, Brandon, I said. The front door burst open again. This time it was not a lawyer. It was the end of the line. The room was emptying, the guests fleeing like rats from a sinking ship, but the nightmare was far from over for my son. Brandon stood in the wreckage of his celebration, his chest heaving, sweat beading on his forehead. He watched the last of the inner circle investors, the men whose money he had already spent in his mind, hesitate at the door. He lunged toward them, desperate to salvage the unsalvageable. Jerry, Mike, wait! Brandon pleaded, grabbing the arm of a man with silver hair and a face like granite. Don't listen to her. This is a hostile legal maneuver. It's a misunderstanding. The deed is in transit. The funds are secure. I swear to you, the crypto yield is guaranteed. The investor. Jerry pulled his arm away with a look of pure distaste. He didn't speak. He just looked down at his phone, which had buzzed in his hand a second before. Then a chorus of vibrations filled the room. The other investor's phone lit up. Then Brandon's own phone on the side table began to chime incessantly, a digital cacophony of doom. It was the Abernathy protocol. When I deposited the bond, Mr. Abernathy hadn't just called the FBI. He had flagged Brandon's social security number in the interbank fraud alert system. In the world of high finance, bad news travels at the speed of light. Jerry looked at his screen, his eyes narrowing. You're flagged, Brandon, Jerry said, his voice flat and final. My compliance officer just texted me. You're under active federal investigation for insurance fraud. Your assets are frozen pending a RICO inquiry. He looked up and the contempt in his eyes was absolute. You didn't just lie about the house, Jerry spat. You lied about your liquidity. You're toxic. No, Brandon stammered, backing away. That's an old error. A glitch. I can explain. There's nothing to explain, the second investor said, pocketing his phone. We're pulling the term sheets. If a single dime of our money touched your accounts, our lawyers will be clawing it back by morning. They turned and walked out into the cool night air, leaving the door wide open. Brandon stood alone in the foyer, watching his future dissolve into the darkness. He looked smaller now. The expensive suit he wore, the one he thought made him a king, now just looked like a costume he had rented for a play that had been canceled. He turned back to the room. He looked at the empty champagne glasses. He looked at Katerina, who stood like a statue of judgment. And then he looked at Vanessa. Vanessa was standing by the cold fireplace. She had been silent during the exodus, watching the power dynamic shift with the calculating eyes of a survivor. She saw Brandon standing there, ruined, exposed, and liable. She saw the empty room. She saw the lawyer. And she made her choice. She took a step away from Brandon. Just one physical step, but emotionally it was a chasm. She looked at me. Her face transformed. The sneer of the socialite vanished. The arrogance evaporated. In its place appeared a mask of tearful victimhood constructed with terrifying speed. Wallace, she whispered. Her voice trembled perfectly. She walked toward me, hands clasped in front of her, like a penitent schoolgirl ignoring her husband completely. Wallace, I had no idea. She pointed a shaking finger at Brandon. He lied to me too. He told me the house was his. He told me you wanted to go to the facility. He said you were dangerous, Wallace. He said if we didn't get you out, you might hurt us. I was scared. Brandon's jaw dropped. He looked at his wife as if she had just stabbed him. Vanessa, he rasped. What are you doing? She spun on him, her eyes flashing with a sudden manufactured fury. Do not talk to me, Brandon, she screamed. You used me. You made me throw away Beatrice's things. You made me treat him like that. I told you it was wrong. I told you we should care for him, but you forced me. She turned back to me, tears now streaming down her cheeks. Tears of fear, not sorrow. Dad, can I call you Dad? I always wanted to take care of you. When Brandon said we were sending you to Green Horizon, I cried. I did ask him. I wanted you here with us. I wanted to cook for you. I wanted to be a family. She reached out as if to touch my arm but stopped short, waiting for an invitation that would never come. Please believe me. I am a victim here too. He is a monster. But I am here now. I can help you. I can take care of you. We can kick him out and I will stay here. I will nurse you. I will handle everything. I watched her performance. It was flawless. It was the desperate pivot of a parasite realizing its host was dying and trying to latch onto the only other warm body in the room. She didn't care about me. She cared about the $50 million Katerina had mentioned. She cared about the house. She cared about staying out of prison. I looked at Brandon. He was staring at his wife with a look of absolute betrayal. The irony was rich. The man who had betrayed his father was now being betrayed by his partner in crime. She's lying, Dad, Brandon whispered, his voice broken. It was her idea. The nursing home, the sale, the crypto. She found the investors. She pushed me every day to get more money. Shut up, Vanessa shrieked. You coward! Own your mistakes! I raised my hand. The gesture was slight, but it silenced them both instantly. I walked over to Vanessa. I stood close enough to smell the fear sweating through her expensive perfume. I looked at her neck, at the string of creamy white pearls glowing against her skin. My wife Beatrice wore those pearls every Sunday for 30 years, I said quietly. She wore them to church. She wore them to weddings. She wore them on the day she died. I reached out. Vanessa flinched, thinking I was going to grab them, but I just hovered my hand near the clasp. You put them on in a hurry, didn't you? I asked softly. You fished them out of whatever hiding place you stashed them in when you thought I was gone, and you put them on to play the part of the lady of the manor. Vanessa nodded eagerly, clinging to the narrative. I saved them, Wallace, she lied. I saved them from the trash. I wanted to keep them safe for you. I shook my head. You are wearing them backward, Vanessa. She froze. Her hand flew to her throat. The clasp, I said. It is a custom magnetic clasp shaped like a small rose. Beatrice always wore it to the side so she could see it. It was her favorite part. You have it yanked around the back, choking you. You don't know how to wear them because you never looked at her. You never saw her. You only saw the price tag. I looked into her eyes, stripping away the last of her defenses. And you are wearing your character wrong too. You think you can put on a mask of kindness now because the money is on my side of the room. But kindness is not a costume, Vanessa. It is a habit. And your habit is cruelty. I turned to Katerina. Ms. Voss, I believe the police are here. As if on cue, the blue lights outside intensified, washing the living room in a strobing glare. The front door was filled by the silhouette of Agent Miller. Behind him were two uniformed officers. Vanessa gasped. She looked at me one last time, her face crumbling. "Wallace, please. I have nowhere to go. He spent all our money." I looked at her. "You have the apartment," I said, "until the rent runs out. I suggest you start looking for a job. I hear Green Horizon is hiring cleaners." Agent Miller stepped into the room. He looked at Brandon, who was slumped against the wall. "Brandon King," he said, "I have a federal warrant for your arrest." Brandon did not run. He did not fight. He just slid down the wall until he was sitting on the floor. He looked at the empty room. He looked at the torn paper he had stomped on earlier, which Katerina's paralegal had carefully collected into an evidence bag. I stepped back. I let the professionals do their work. I watched as they pulled my son to his feet. I watched as they cuffed his hands behind his back. The metal click of the handcuffs was the loudest sound in the world. Brandon looked at me as they walked him to the door. He was crying now. Not the angry tears of a man who lost a deal, but the terrified tears of a boy who realized the dark is real. "Dad," he choked out. "Dad, help me." I leaned on my cane. My heart was breaking, but my resolve was iron. "I helped you for 40 years, Brandon," I said. "I helped you by hiding the world from you. I helped you by fixing your mistakes. And look where it got us." I looked him in the eye. "I am helping you now, son. I am letting you face the consequences. It is the only lesson I have left to teach." They walked him out into the night. Vanessa stood alone in the center of the room, shivering, the pearls still around her neck, backward and stolen. Katerina stepped forward. "Mrs. King," she said to Vanessa, using the married name Vanessa had always hated, "the officers will escort you off the premises. You are not to remove any items from this house. Not a spoon, not a towel, and certainly not those pearls." Vanessa reached up. Her hands shaking, she undid the clasp. She held the pearls out to me. I did not take them. "Give them to the evidence officer," I said. "They have been part of a crime scene." I turned my back on her and walked toward the window to watch my son being put into the back of a federal vehicle. The party was over. The house was empty. But for the first time in a long time, it felt clean. The silence that followed the departure of the guests was heavy, but it was short-lived. The blue and red strobes that had been washing over the living room walls suddenly intensified, accompanied by the sharp chirp of a siren, cutting just once through the night air to announce arrival. It was the sound of authority arriving to clean up a mess that had been 20 years in the making. The front door, which was still standing open from the exodus of the investors, was filled by a wall of windbreakers. Special Agent Miller walked in first. He did not look like a guest. He looked like a surgeon entering an operating theater. His face was set in a line of grim professional determination. Behind him came two uniformed federal officers, their hands resting near their belts, not aggressively, but with a readiness that sucked the remaining oxygen out of the room. But it was the man walking beside Agent Miller who made Brandon let out a sound like a dying animal. It was Mr. Abernathy, the bank manager. He looked out of place in my foyer, still wearing his office suit. His shoes wet from the rain, holding a thick plastic evidence bag against his chest, as if it were a shield. Inside the bag, visible even from across the room, was the cream-colored paper. It was smoothed out and dried, but the coffee stain on the corner was unmistakable. Brandon scrambled backward until his back hit the cold marble of the fireplace. He looked from the agents to Abernathy, to the paper, and finally to me. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. The loop was closed. The trap was sprung. Brandon King, Agent Miller, said, his voice booming in the empty hall. "Step away from the fireplace. Keep your hands where I can see them." Brandon did not move. He was paralyzed by the sheer impossibility of what he was seeing. I didn't do anything," he stammered. "This is a civil matter. My father is confused. We were just having a party. It stopped being a civil matter the moment you filed a false insurance claim 10 years ago, Miller said, closing the distance. And it became a federal criminal matter the moment you locked your father in a basement to facilitate a fraudulent real estate transaction. Miller pulled a pair of handcuffs from his belt. The metal ratcheting sound as he tested the locking mechanism was sharp and final. Brandon King, you are under arrest for federal insurance fraud, wire fraud, aggravated elder abuse, and unlawful imprisonment. You have the right to remain silent. 2 officers moved in. They grabbed Brandon by the arms. He flinched violently, trying to shake them off. "No," he screamed. "No, you don't understand. That paper is fake." He pointed a shaking finger at the evidence bag in Abernathy's hands. "It is trash," he yelled, his face twisting into a mask of desperate denial. "It is garbage. I threw it away. I saw it go into the trash. I tore it up. I destroyed it." Abernathy stepped forward. He looked at Brandon with a mixture of disappointment and pity. "You tore up a facsimile," Brandon Abernathy said, his voice calm and measured. "Your father deposited the original instrument at my branch at 4:55 p.m. today. It has been authenticated, processed, and flagged. The Treasury Department has already issued the freeze on your assets based on the fraud alert attached to this serial number." Brandon stared at the bag. He looked at the coffee stain. He remembered the moment in the kitchen. He remembered the smell of the wet grounds. He remembered his own arrogance as he tossed it aside. He fought against the officers as they pulled his arms behind his back. The cuffs clicked shut. 1, 2. "It is worthless," he screamed, thrashing against the restraint. "It is just paper. It is old paper. It shouldn't matter. It shouldn't send me to jail. I threw it away." He looked at me, his eyes wide and wet with tears of rage, not remorse. "Dad, tell them," he begged. "Tell them it is just a piece of paper. Tell them it doesn't mean anything." I walked toward him. The tap of my cane on the hardwood floor was the only sound in the room besides his ragged breathing. I stopped a few feet away, just out of reach of his desperation. I looked at the son I had tried to protect for so long. I looked at the man who had traded his soul for a lease on a car. I gestured to the bag in Abernathy's hands. "You are right, Brandon," I said softly. "It is just paper. It is cotton fiber and ink. If you burn it, it turns to ash. If you wet it, it turns to pulp. By itself, it has no power." I looked him in the eye. "You threw it away because you looked at it, and you saw trash. You saw something old. You saw something that didn't look like the shiny digital money you worship. You judged it by its cover just like you judged me." I took a step closer. "You threw it away because you thought it was worthless. Just like you threw me in that cellar. Just like you threw away your mother's things. To you, we were just old paper taking up space in your new world." Brandon stopped struggling. He hung his head, sobbing. "But you forgot one thing, son," I said. My voice hardened. "You forgot how value works. The value is not in the paper, Brandon. The paper is just a vessel. The value lies in the signature at the bottom. The value comes from the authority of the man who created it." I pointed to the bond. "That paper is worth $50 million not because of the ink, but because I signed it. Because I built the trust that backs it. Because I spent 30 years hunting down men smarter and more dangerous than you to earn the seal that sits on that document." I pointed to myself. "And I am your father. I created you. I raised you. I backed you. My signature is on your life, Brandon. I co-signed your loans. I paid your tuition. I vouched for your character when no one else would. You thought you could just crumple me up and toss me in the bin, and the value would remain yours to keep." I shook my head slowly. "But when you try to destroy the Creator, you lose the value of the creation. You are bankrupt, son. Moral bankruptcy, spiritual bankruptcy, and now financial bankruptcy." Brandon looked up. His face was streaked with tears. "Dad, please," he whispered. I am your son." "No," I said. "My son would never have locked me in the dark. My son would never have looked at his mother's pearls and seen a price tag. My son died a long time ago, strangled by your greed." I turned to Agent Miller. "Take him," I said. The officers turned him around. They marched him toward the door, past the stunned silence of his wife, past the lawyer who had dismantled his life, past the father who had finally stopped enabling him. As they reached the threshold, Brandon looked back one last time. He looked at the empty house. He looked at the life he thought he was owed. "I am sorry," he choked out. I watched him go. The blue lights washed over him, turning his expensive suit into a gray uniform. "I know," I whispered to the empty room. "We are all sorry." Agent Miller stopped by me on his way out. "We will need a statement, Mr. King," he said. "But it can wait until morning." "You look tired." "I am tired," I admitted. Mr. Abernathy stepped forward. "I can give you a ride to the Hotel Wallace," he said. Or anywhere you want to go." I looked around the living room. The furniture was gone. The walls were bare. The air still smelled of the expensive food that had gone uneaten. "Take me to a hotel," I said. "I do not want to sleep here tonight. This is not a home anymore. It is just a building." I walked out into the night. The rain had stopped. The air was cold and clean. I watched the taillights of the federal car disappear down the street, carrying the last of my burdens away. I felt a strange lightness in my chest. It was not happiness. It was the absence of weight. I reached into my pocket and touched the copy of the paper I had used to trap him. I pulled it out. I looked at it one last time under the street lamp, then I crumpled it up. I walked over to the trash bin at the curb, where Vanessa had dumped my wife's coat earlier that day. I tossed the paper ball inside. This time, it really was just trash. I did not need it anymore. I had my answer. And for the first time in 10 years, I had my life back. The blue lights of the police cruisers finally faded into the distance, leaving the cul-de-sac in darkness. The neighbors who had peered through their blinds pulled their curtains shut. The spectacle was over. The house that Brandon had tried so desperately to steal was now silent. It was a heavy tomb-like silence that pressed against my eardrums. I stood in the center of the living room, leaning on my cane. The air still smelled of the expensive cologne Brandon wore, and the lingering scent of the catered food that was slowly going cold on the trays. Katerina Voss, my lawyer, stood by the fireplace. She had dismissed her team of paralegals. It was just the two of us now, surrounded by the wreckage of a family. Katerina walked over to the side table where Brandon had left his bottle of single malt scotch. She poured 2 glasses neat. She walked over and handed one to me. "Drink," she said softly. "You look like you are about to fall over Wallace." I took the glass. My hand was trembling, not from fear, but from the adrenaline crash. I took a sip. The liquid burned a pleasant fire in my chest. "He is gone," I whispered. "My son is gone." "He made his choice," Wallace, Katerina said. Her voice was not lawyerly anymore. It was the voice of an old friend. "You gave him every chance. You warned him." I walked over to the window and looked out at the empty driveway. "There is something you do not know, Kat," I said. "Something I never told you when we were building the case." She swirled her drink, waiting. "You asked me earlier why the bond was in the Bible," I said. "You asked why I kept a bearer instrument worth $50 million tucked inside a book in a drawer that anyone could open." I turned to face her. "I did not put it there," I said. "Beatrice did." Katerina raised an eyebrow. "Beatrice?" she asked. "But I thought the bond was part of your secure holdings." I shook my head. I sat down on the arm of the velvet sofa. 10 years ago, when Brandon filed that insurance claim, he didn't just lie about the fire. He was desperate. He had gotten involved with loan sharks in Atlantic City. He owed them money he didn't have. He torched the garage to get the payout, but he didn't destroy the bond. He was too greedy for that. He tried to sell it. I took another sip of the scotch, letting the memory wash over me. He went to a fence in New York, I continued. A man I used to investigate back in the 90s. Brandon tried to sell him the bond for 10 cents on the dollar. He needed quick cash to pay off the sharks. But he was sloppy. The fence called me. He knew who I was. He knew the name King Logistics. He offered to sell it back to me before he reported it to the feds. I looked at the floor where the torn pieces of the copy still lay. I was going to let him go to jail back then, Kat. I was so angry. I was ready to turn him in. But Beatrice... She stopped me. I closed my eyes, seeing my wife's face. She begged me, I said. She told me he was just a boy. She told me he was lost. She said if we sent him to prison now, he would be broken forever. She wanted to save him. So what did you do? Katerina asked. I did nothing, I said. Beatrice did it. You know those successful years Brandon had, the years he thought he was a real estate genius. He wasn't making a dime. He was losing money on every deal. I was funneling money into his accounts through shell companies so he wouldn't go bankrupt. I was propping him up because Beatrice couldn't bear to see him fail. I looked at Katerina. Beatrice took the money I had set aside for our anniversary trip. She took her own savings. She even sold her car. She gathered the cash and she went to New York herself. She bought the bond back from the fence. She saved Brandon from federal prison 10 years ago, and he never even knew it. Katerina looked stunned. She bought it back, she whispered. Yes, I said. She brought it home. She sat at this very table right here in this room and she cried over it. She told me, Wallace, this is his life. We have to keep it safe for him. One day he will hit rock bottom. One day he will need a lifeline that money can't buy. And when that day comes, we will give him this. We will tell him the truth. And maybe it will save him. I felt a tear roll down my cheek. I wiped it away angrily. She hid it in the Bible, I said. She said it was the only place he might look if he ever sought redemption. She said, keep it there, Wallace. If he is ever kind to you, if he ever shows you he has changed, give it to him. Use it to pay his debts. Use it to set him free. I looked at the empty spot where the trash can had been in the kitchen. That paper was not just an asset, Kat. It was a love letter. It was his mother's sacrifice. It was the physical embodiment of her forgiveness. It was the break-in case of emergency glass for his entire life. I stood up and walked to the mantel, and he threw it in the trash. I said, my voice breaking. He looked at his mother's sacrifice and he called it garbage. He called it worthless. Katerina walked over and placed a hand on my shoulder. He didn't know, Wallace, she said. That is the tragedy, I replied. He didn't know because he didn't care to know. He didn't open the Bible to read. He shook it to see if money would fall out. He didn't look at me and see a father. He saw an ATM. I turned to her. If he had come to me today, if he had just said, Dad, I am in trouble. I am scared. Please help me. If he had offered me a cup of tea instead of a bologna sandwich, I would have walked to that desk. I would have opened the Bible, and I would have handed him the bond. I would have paid off every shark, every debt, every mistake. I would have saved him. I gestured to the door where the police had taken him. He was holding his own salvation in his hands, Kat. He held it, and he crushed it. He threw away $50 million and his freedom because he didn't like the texture of the paper. Katerina sighed. She looked tired. It is a heavy thing to carry, Wallace, she said, knowing you could have saved him. I shook my head. I couldn't save him, I said. Beatrice tried. I tried. but you cannot save someone who is determined to drown everyone else to stay afloat. He didn't just throw away the bond. He threw away the last piece of his mother. And that is why I made the call. I finished the scotch. It tasted bitter now. He killed the part of me that was a father, I said. Tonight, when he stomped on that paper, he didn't just destroy evidence. He destroyed the last hope I had for him. He proved that Beatrice's sacrifice was wasted on him. I looked around the room one last time. I am done here, I said. I do not want to be in this house anymore. It is full of ghosts. Katerina nodded. The car is waiting outside, she said. We can go. I walked toward the door. I paused at the threshold. I looked back at the empty space where the grandfather clock used to be. He wanted an inheritance, I whispered to the silence. He got one. He got the truth. I turned off the lights, leaving the house in darkness. I walked out into the cool night air, leaving the memory of Beatrice and the son we tried to save behind me locked inside a house that was no longer ours. The paper was gone. The money was locked away. And for the first time in 40 years, I was truly alone. But as I walked toward the car, I realized something strange. The crushing weight on my chest was gone. The secret was out. And the silence was no longer heavy. It was just peace. The trial was not the sensational media circus that Brandon would have wanted. It was a cold, efficient dismantling of a life built on lies. I sat in the back row of the federal courthouse every day, not because I wanted to see him suffer, but because I needed to see it end. I needed to witness the final accounting. Brandon looked smaller in his orange jumpsuit. The expensive suits were gone, the Italian loafers were replaced by canvas slip-ons, and without his costumes, he was just a frightened middle-aged man who had gambled his soul and lost. The evidence was overwhelming. The forensic trail of the insurance fraud from 10 years ago was undeniable. The wire fraud charges regarding the investors were airtight. And the testimony of Agent Miller regarding the elder abuse and unlawful imprisonment sealed his fate. When the judge read the sentence, he did not look at Brandon with anger. He looked at him with the same weary disappointment I felt. 10 years in federal prison, with a mandatory restitution order that would garnish any wages he earned for the rest of his life. Brandon did not scream. He did not cry. He just looked at me. I think he was waiting for me to stand up and save him one last time. I stayed seated. I watched the marshals lead him away, and the heavy door closed behind him, with a finality that echoed in my heart. Vanessa did not wait for the prison doors to close before she cut the cord. She filed for divorce 3 days after the arrest. She claimed she was a victim of financial coercion, that she had been duped by a criminal mastermind. It was a valiant attempt at a new narrative, but the federal government does not deal in narratives. They deal in assets. Because the house and the cars and the jewelry had been purchased or leased with funds mingled with the proceeds of fraud, everything was seized. The RICO statutes are unforgiving. Vanessa walked out of the courthouse not as a wealthy divorcee, but as a woman with a suitcase full of clothes and a credit score of 0. She tried to call me once a week after the sentencing. I saw her number on my screen. I did not answer. I blocked the number. I did not hate her. Hate requires energy, and I was done spending energy on people who saw me as a line item on a balance sheet. I heard from Katerina that she moved back to her hometown in Ohio to live with her sister. I hope she finds peace there. I hope she learns how to wear a necklace properly. The house sold in 2 weeks. I did not go back inside. I hired a company to clear out whatever was left. I told them to donate the furniture and to throw away anything that smelled of cleaning fluid or bologna. I signed the closing papers in Katerina's office. Handing over the keys did not feel like a loss. It felt like exhaling a breath I had been holding for 40 years. The house was just wood and stone. The home I had built with Beatrice was gone the moment she died, and holding on to the structure would not bring her back. It would only remind me of the son who had tried to steal it. With the house gone and the legal battles over, I was left with the trust. $50 million. It was a number so large it felt abstract. I did not want a yacht. I did not want a mansion. I did not want to join a country club. I realized that the money had been a burden for 30 years, a secret weight that I had carried to protect a son who did not deserve it. Now I had to decide what to do with it. I sat in Katerina's office looking at the trust documents. I thought about Beatrice. I thought about the early years of our marriage when we were poor but hopeful. We had tried for years to have more children. We wanted a house full of noise and laughter. We wanted brothers and sisters for Brandon. But it never happened. We had accepted it. We had poured all that love, all that potential into our one son. And look how that turned out. I made a decision. Create a new foundation, I told Katerina. The Beatrice King Scholarship Fund. Katerina took notes, her pen moving smoothly across the paper. What are the parameters, Wallace? She asked. I want it for orphans, I said. I want it for children who have no one. Children who have been left behind by the system. I want to pay for their education. I want to pay for their housing. I want to give them the start in life that I tried to give Brandon. I looked out the window at the city skyline. We wanted a big family, Kat, I said softly. We never got it. Maybe this is how we get it. Maybe this is how I become a father again to children who will appreciate the chance. Katerina smiled. It was a genuine, warm smile. Beatrice would have loved that, she said. The paperwork was filed the next day. The assets were transferred. The burden was lifted. I kept enough for myself to live comfortably, to travel, to drink good wine. But the bulk of the empire, the weight of the King Logistics Trust, was now dedicated to building futures instead of protecting a lie. A month later, I stood in the terminal of SeaTac International Airport. I was wearing a new suit. Not flashy, but well-tailored. I carried a single leather satchel. I walked past the long lines of economy class and approached the first-class counter. The agent smiled at me. Destination? Mr. King, she asked. Paris, I said. I had never been. Brandon had lied about me being there, but the lie had planted a seed. I wanted to see the Seine. I wanted to sit in a cafe and watch the world go by without looking over my shoulder. I boarded the plane. I found my seat, a wide leather pod near the window. A flight attendant appeared instantly, offering me a glass of champagne. I accepted it. I sat back and watched the rain streak against the glass. It looked like the same rain that had fallen on the day of the funeral, but it felt different now. It was cleaning the world, not drowning it. As the plane taxied to the runway, I felt the engines roar to life. The power was immense, undeniable. We lifted off, pushing through the gray clouds into the brilliant sunlight above. I looked down at the shrinking city. Somewhere down there was a prison cell where my son was waking up. Somewhere down there was a cheap apartment where Vanessa was sleeping. And somewhere down there was the empty lot where my house used to be. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my wallet. I opened it and took out a small, folded piece of paper. It was a photocopy of the bond, the one Katerina had used to trick Brandon. I had kept a small piece of it, a corner with the treasury seal, just as a reminder. I looked at it. It was just paper. It had no power over me anymore. The fear was gone. The obligation was gone. I smiled, a true, deep smile that reached my eyes. I tore the paper in half, then in half again, and again until it was nothing but confetti in my hand. The flight attendant walked by with a silver tray collecting trash before the meal service. "May I take that, sir?" she asked, gesturing to the scraps in my hand. "Yes," I said, dropping the pieces onto her tray. "You can take it. It is just trash." She walked away. I took a sip of the champagne. It was cold and crisp. I looked out at the horizon where the sun was setting, painting the sky in colors of fire and gold. I was 70 years old. I was alone. But for the first time in my life, I was free. And the view from here was spectacular. I spent 40 years believing that a father's duty is to shield his child from the harshness of the world. I thought love meant fixing every mistake and paying every debt. But I learned the hard way that you cannot save someone who is determined to drown everyone else just to stay afloat. True wealth isn't found in a bearer bond or a property deed. It is found in the dignity of living an honest life. My son looked at that paper and saw a fortune. I looked at it and saw a chain that bound me to a lie. Destroying it wasn't a loss. It was the moment I realized that my legacy isn't what I leave behind for others, but how I choose to live the time I have left. If you have ever had to make a difficult choice to protect your own peace, hit that like button and share your story in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about justice and truth.